A very good evening to you all, folks, and welcome yet to another edition of Wealthwise with Edelweiss. Today, we have a very highly regarded speaker, Mr. Anil Gelani, a versatile financial professional with more than over 2 decades of experience in Indian equities, fixed income markets, and credit research. He's currently the head of passive investments and products at DSP Investment Managers and was previously heading the niche or very highly regarded product for the pension funds. He was the CIO for them. The topic, as you have noticed today, is the silver lining opportunity during crisis. Now, the topic will tell you or give you an example of what can be found or what do you need to look at to identify how to navigate through these waters in the next few months or let's say the next 1 year or so. Mr. Gilani will take us through his views on the diversified portfolio in anticipation of a possible fiscal stimulus, maybe his views on reflation or stagflation if that is expected, and how one should expand their views on the different kinds of avenues available for investments and savings. Anil Saab, welcome to our platform, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Zohar. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you,
And
sir.
Edelweiss does a very high grade and very good level of engagement. So I'm very happy to be associated with this session.
Thank you, sir. So to the audience, I would like to tell you that please note there might be a time lag of 10 to 15 seconds due to connectivity or network issues. I request you to kindly bear with us. Anil Saab, over to you. Please go ahead, sir. You're on camera.
Sure. Thank you very much, Zohar. So wish you all a very warm welcome. Good evening or good morning from wherever you are joining. As Zohar outlined, I'm going to be discussing about some very interesting topic today. And what I'm going to do is I've made one small deck which I'll use as a base. I'll go through that while sharing my views over the next 20 to 25 minutes. And after that, we'll keep it as a very open and engaging kind of a Q&A session, So what I've done is I've tried to articulate where we are today in terms of the broader economy and capital markets, and then trying to connect the dots that, okay, if this is how we are seeing the current situation, what should one do with your portfolio? How do you allocate your hard earned money, and what kind of portfolio allocation strategies you should try and use? So I'll just go through that, and I've tried to make it very engaging with some charts and some pictures. I'm just sharing my screen now as we speak. And in between, I'll request all of you to be very engaging and participative in one or two polls that I have set up also. So you will see a chat window at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to enter into that chat window as we move along, both for posing any questions that you might have, and then when we highlight the poll questions, do feed your responses at that point of time. So to start with, I mean, friends, over the past almost now 6 to 7 months, people have got used to a lot of words starting with the letter C. I mean, sometimes people talk about COVID, Corona, crude, crash, but I think we should all use for C as C for calm. In all of these crises also, one should try to maintain calm and try to see what has happened in the past, try to study how others in the history have coped with this type of unforeseeable situations and prepare ourselves for this type of situation. So this is one very interesting point I would like to highlight and start with, that one should try to prepare for the unknown. This is a certain situation which are unforeseen or unpredictable, but try to learn from how others in the past have coped with this type of situations. And whenever we talk about unforeseen, improbable, first thing which comes to mind is Nassim Taleb. Right? Everybody familiar with them. Mr. Taleb has been very famous for many things, but amongst them, his one book where he had described is Black Swan. So Black Swan as an animal got popularized by Mr. Taleb. Now, Black Swan technically is like a very, very improbable event. Nobody has ever seen it before. It's like every day you walk into the park and there is a pond where there are lots of swans. And suddenly one day you are walking in, instead of all the swans, suddenly you see a black colored swan. So after the GFC, global financial crisis of 2008, this term or this animal or bird rather, sorry, got very popularized by Mr. Taleb. And to give a very basic context to that is that the black swan, people say we have to prepare for black swan event, black swan is coming, black swan. But black swan is a very improbable and very rare event. So it's very difficult to predict in advance. And even if some anticipation is there, to keep yourself or your portfolio ready for that can be very impractical. You can't suddenly hedge a large portion of your portfolio thinking that this type of a very unexpected event will happen. It will be very expensive for your portfolio, or likewise for any other specific event. But structurally, when such an event happens, it becomes a very significant issue and it can cause very heavy damage. But over the period of time, then what people have started thinking about that, well, if this is a kind of a situation which we can't be prepared for and it's very impractical to try to hedge my portfolio for, then let us focus on other type of events. And then because of that, now another animal became popular called the grey rhino. So grey rhino are certain threats which are predictable events which are available and out there open for everybody to see. So this term was coined by an author, Michelle Wucker. So she was speaking recently at a conference in India, so I was engaging that how this word the grey rhino came. So the logic is that the rhinos are always grey. So you are aware that yes, this is a kind of event which is there, it can happen, it's open for the world to see, and it's a huge animal.
Sorry to disturb you.
Yeah.
Sir, we are getting something that they are not able to hear you properly, sir. May I request you to please speak closer to the microphone, sir?
Okay. Is this better? I've just moved much closer to the microphone.
Yes, now. Sir. Yes, sir. This is infinitely better. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. So the grey rhino is a kind of a different situation as compared to a black swan, unexpected, never heard of before. Rhino to rhino hota hai, grey hota hai, everybody is aware of that. But it's just that how one can identify a challenge which is coming straight towards us and react to it. But what happens very often is that in a situation like this, human biases come to play. So very often, let's say I'll take the current situation as an example. Now let's assume that last year around this time, like when we were in October, November of 2019, we were starting to read in the newspaper and some global media that this virus is suddenly picking up in China and some other parts. So, well, structurally, one would think that yes, it's common, sometimes seasonal thing. Very often certain viruses like this come up. There was a H1N1 virus, some other flu virus. By the time it was December end, it was quite evident, like that spread to Hong Kong and some other markets. There was some initial lockdown phases in some countries which were announced. But still, if you're sitting over here in India or in some other parts of the world, not many people reacted to it thinking that yes, it's a standard thing, let it happen. So it's like a grey rhino. Everybody is aware that rhino is there. Rhino is walking towards us, charging. It's a very heavy animal. If it comes right at you, it will cause a very big damage. But sometimes it's a human bias that we as humans are programmed to pay more attention to certain sets of data or certain information or certain news that we like rather than certain information that we don't like, we tend to avoid. So grey rhino is a kind of a term coined for various things, not just in investment portfolio, but it could be in business decisions, even in personal lives. Sometimes we feel, yaar boss, this was evident, I was seeing this issue, I could have reacted to it much in advance to make a complete decision change in my personal life. So these are very common instances. And in the recent times, what we have seen, let's say, for example, if somebody would have realized these news flows, let's say in the month of December or January, that yes, this virus can really be spreading very fast and it can impact in a big way, then they could have very well on a timely basis taken some corrective actions. So this is another very important market phenomenon and a human bias aspect that I would like to highlight, moving a little bit away from the black swan, which structurally, technically, nobody can predict or impractical to hedge against. Now I'll move to the third animal. This is another very exotic animal, and it is called the invisible virus. So black, gray, and then now invisible. Hence this square but box also, you see, I've just kept it black. I mean, there is nothing, a photo I could put over there. And why the name invisible virus, and by whom it got popular? Well, I mean, by somebody, I mean, nobody knows. But yes, this term invisible enemy got popularized by Mr. Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, where in one of his tweets, he had mentioned that we are going to defeat the invisible enemy. So this also, I think, so comes from some old TV series where there was a invisible enemy concept, where some viruses had started attacking mankind. So I think he had coined from there, but I don't know where actually he had coined it from. So current situation, you can try to define it as an invisible virus. No color, nobody really knows where it came from or what's the situation. But yes, everybody's very much impacted by that, and people like Donald Trump have mentioned and given this terminology that yes, we are going to defeat the invisible enemy. Now, I think just to move to the next point, what a key important aspect of how we feel this invisible virus is different from previous crisis. So I have just put up a small poll. I mean, feel free to just jump in and add any comments that you have on the chat window. See, there are various discussions and arguments, but what is your view? That is the current crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, is it different from the previous crisis? Like, you know, we have very often done many comparisons and many charts and many data points that yes, previously this had happened and after that XYZ action was taken and then we saw these kind of changes. So what is your personal opinion? Whether do you think that this is similar to or different from the previous crisis? Just a simple yes or no. I mean, you know, feel free to just type into your chat window. I'll just wait for 30 seconds if any responses come. But or in your mind, you can think of some response that yes, well, I mean, I think this is a kind of a very similar to, let's say, what we saw previously in terms of, you know, how capital markets have reacted. It was a crash and then a bounce back, or whether it's a kind of a, you know, impact to the economy on ground. And after that, I'll take you through my perspective on this aspect and connecting that with the capital markets, how we are seeing. So in my view, because of the following reasons, we'll just go through. The current crisis is very different. So we'll just go through 4 or 5 aspects of how the crisis originated and how the cure for this is going to impact the capital markets. So very briefly, all of us are aware that yes, this particular crisis is very different from the global financial crisis, which was, as the name suggested, financial crisis. So it started or originated from the financial sector. Right, there was some disturbance, turbulence in the financial sector. Entire banking system got a trust deficit. Because of that, it transmitted into the real economy. People started losing little bit jobs, income became under question. So demand got disturbed and disrupted. And because demand collapsed, so supply also sort of pushed down and stopped. Now in the current situation, it's a little bit very opposite. This has originated from the real economy, and then from there transmitted to the financial sector. In the current crisis, the supply chain collapsed, and because of that, as a consequence of that, the demand collapsed. So very different in that context. Today, if you speak to anybody on ground, even if you speak to the taxi driver in like not even metros, but in like Kanpur as a small city, they'll be able to relate to it. Yes, this problem is happening, etc. Whereas in the global financial crisis, if you speak to a taxi driver, not even in small town, but even in Manhattan, in New York, basically where the main epicenter of the crisis was, maybe they would not realize, what are you talking, man? I mean, you know, what is this GFC and what is subprime mortgage and what was the banking channel crisis? I can't relate to it, you know. So that's the difference. I mean, in today's crisis, each and every person, lay person on the street has got impacted in the real economy, which has moved differently. So what are central banks and government entities globally doing? Earlier in 2008 crisis, the key problem was to rebuild the trust in the financial markets, right? Everybody had got disrupted, which was quite simple. You know, the central banks got into action. In conjunction with that, even governments helped with some fiscal stimulus, and you know, things were starting to get normal. By 2009 second half, things that's comfortably started to little bit look better. However, in the current situation, it's a little bit different that we need to work on the real economy. Medical science has to evolve victorious from the entire situation and come up with a solution. After that, the supply chain will start getting in a good shape and gradually demand will get restored. So no doubt, monetary stimulus is important and is required, but maybe not just that. There will be a lot of other things that are going to be needed. And now coming to us as a India, as an economy, now in 2008, if you recall, friends, I mean, there is a lot of debate about which GDP series to look at, but still, if you look at broader GDP growth rates, we were fairly comfortable about 9% growth rates. And we had a financial sector which was relatively strong. So though in the US and some other parts of the world, the key crisis was in the financial markets, little bit fortunately in India, we were fairly in a relatively strong position. And also we had a good fiscal room. You know, there was a good comfort on the fiscal stimulus availability because we had a good room over there. Now in today's situation, already before we hit March, our GDP was already slowing down. We were at about 5% levels. Since about 1.5 years already, we were facing some crisis, some liquidity issues in NBFC, HFCs, etc. And even in terms of fiscal deficit, you know, we already were like quite stretched in that sense. So little different war chest or positioning as compared to 2008 and now. But one big position which is comfortable is our FX reserve, forex reserves, which is well beyond 500 billion, or which is equivalent to close to about 11.8 months, roughly about 1 year of our import bill we have as a forex reserves. So that is a one good benefit out of the 2008 versus now. And globally, as we move ahead with solutions, one important thing to keep in mind is that earlier the entire world was sort of together, you know, UK, US and the Eurozone, everybody wanted to come together and restore the faith and comfort in the entire banking system. Now in the current situation, little bit unfortunately, you know, boundaries have in fact become very much stronger. You know, already the trade wars and all were there at that point of time. Now again, little bit things will be a little bit challenging. So other than the one positive aspect that there is a very positive and huge coordination in the medical science side, all other angles are a little bit challenging as compared to the previous time in terms of the global coordination. So with that aspect, how in the past we have seen, whether if you look at the 90s, where we saw a bit of a crisis and the correction, or 2000 dot-com bust, and after that the recovery. In the current situation, what shape of the recovery will be both in the economy, whether maybe it's a U shape, it will be a little bit elongated shape, V shape, well, a little bit different aspect, everybody has a view, or maybe it could be W shaped, and connecting that to the capital markets then, that how the capital markets will react. So little bit uncertainty in this current situation because of the significant difference in the way in which economy has got impacted. So if we see that, well, 2009, we saw a good pullback in the capital markets, you know, because the stimulus which was provided that soon found its way into risk assets like equities, commodities, etc. But in the current situation, at least yet, we haven't seen too much liquidity coming. So let's say even if you look at Indian markets, broader, let's say Nifty index, we are almost back to like, you know, similar levels like what we had seen in March, I mean in February, March, but it's not on the back of very heavy liquidity yet. Just last month of August, we saw good liquidity, like, you know, about, $6 billion worth of fresh flow from foreigners. But otherwise, if you look at March, April, 8, 9 billion, $10 billion worth of outflow had happened. So net, we are just barely there. You know, it's not like some big money has suddenly started flowing in because of which market has rallied, but that liquidity is yet to come. So all the money that has got pumped in, gradually it will start coming into risk assets. At that point of time, some further fresh round of flows, both into emerging markets broadly, and within that, Indian equities will come in. Now one has to just decide and, you know, try to put some estimate whether it will continue to chase this type of Rithik stocks like a polarized market, what we have seen in the past about 18 to 20 months, or whether it will be a little bit broad based. Now, 2009 was a much more broad-based rally where even mid-cap, everything had worked well. So hopefully, if a similar type of a thing approaches, then we will be in a better position for that. Now, one more small poll. Do you think that the current situation will force the global large governments as well as central banks to continue these coordinated efforts? Or do you think that no, well, only might be some, monetary stimulus will happen, but fiscal stimulus will stop, or vice versa? I mean, any thoughts? I mean, very much keen to hear your views. So please feel free to use the chat window. I am seeing as we speak on the window that some of them have spoken about the previous poll as well. So just take a couple of minutes to put your thoughts to it, or as we discuss ahead, you can feel free to put in your views on that. In my view, and I will articulate a little bit in more detail, the governments as well as central banks will continue their coordinated efforts. And in this situation, it becomes very important that what should I do with my money? I have my hard-earned money, I have my monthly salary which is coming. How should I allocate my money? How should I manage my portfolio in terms of my broad asset allocation? Because if the central banks are going to continue to be little dovish, little stimulus kind of a stance, if central governments are also going to continue with their fiscal stimulus, then what is going to happen into the capital markets? So I would like to just highlight again with now some more bright pictures and some memories of some countries that one would have visited. So I was just putting together this very nice picture of Washington, where you see the Washington the memorial on the backdrop of the White House, and very similar one, this kind of obelisk structure is there also in Buenos Aires, which is in Argentina, one of the large, Latin American market of country rather. So when you look at the Washington Consensus, what it means or what it stands for is countries should follow very prudent fiscal policies, very tightly run kind of government balance sheet, no intervention, more and more deregulation, don't own any companies as a state, have it like a privatization, no PSU type of entities, so that is the criteria which was prescribed for certain countries which were getting global aid from unilateral agencies, and the predefined criteria which were laid down are very commonly or popularly known as Washington Consensus, where they were forced as a country to run very prudent fiscal policies and make sure that the funds which they have received are managed in a very prudent way. Now, if you look at the Buenos Aires Consensus, it's exactly opposite of that. Over here, what happens is that the government is running the entire fiscal expansion. They want to kickstart or give a stimulus to the economy, and they're doing it by way of fiscally expansionary policy. So they are not worried about large levels of borrowing. They don't want to do too much of deregulation. They want to keep control on their hands. They want to have protectionism type of approach. So exact opposite of what we see in Washington Consensus, where very prudent way should operate. Here is very opposite. Now, so what? I didn't understand. If somebody will say, "Sir, ये क्या बोल रहे हो यार? मेरे को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है." I'll explain in the next slide. To conclude over here, when governments and central banks are operating with a view of a Washington Consensus, they will not do too much of fiscal stimulus, means they will not give too much benefits. They will not have large balance sheet expansion. So in that situation, the money supply into the entire ecosystem will be much more constrained, and they will expect things to linger around for much longer. Whereas on the other hand, the Buenos Aires Consensus is more populist. They just want to anyhow give a big boost and stimulus to the economy to jumpstart it. So I will take one example and looking at the US market. If you see 2008 period, the orange line and the gray line is the Federal Reserve, that is the central bank's balance sheet. So we see it has started increasing, and after that, what happened is that the orange line fell down. So orange line is the US government's spending. So in 2008 crisis, the balance sheet expansion happened, but overall government spending started to decline. However, current situation is such that both the government spending also is increasing as well as the Federal Reserve's balance sheet also is increasing. So both sides, the fiscal stimulus also is happening in a very big way, and the monetary stimulus also is giving a very high push. And on the other side, federal, like just even if you look at last evening's meeting, they are very clear that they are not going to, touch the rates. They are going to maintain a very dovish stand. They are concerned about demand catching up to the pre-crisis levels, and the inflation from their perspective is well below the targeted level. So they are not going to be worried about the stimulus causing inflation. So what one can safely assume that we are not at all in a Washington consensus type situation. We are in the exact opposite, where governments are not bothering about fiscal prudence, but they are mainly looking at giving stimulus and kickstarting the economy. Central banks are expanding their balance sheets. So with this type of action, ultimately, we could lead to a higher inflation. So now I have just highlighted a very interesting 4-quadrant chart where we look at growth and inflation. So if there is a high growth and low inflation, standard classic Goldilocks situation, everybody's very happy and things are moving very, very nicely. Currently, where we are is a question to everybody that growth is declining. So we are in the declining growth phase. And now somewhere in April, people were worried that inflation also is declining. There was a negative inflation. Growth is degrowing. World GDP was forecast to degrow by about 5%. So we were in a situation where things were moving towards a deflation. So it could either be deflation, but now suddenly if we are seeing some bit of inflation coming back, we are seeing central banks and governments are doing a monetary and fiscal stimulus. So we could see again because of that inflation coming. So we could be on the borderline either of deflation or maybe stagflation. In the current situation, what we have also seen that little bit inflation started inching upward, though growth has remained in a negative territory. So if that type of situation will come through, then we will possibly enter into a situation of a stagflation, which will in some way result in a decline in the value of currency. That will result into a higher focus on real assets like commodities, energy, like as kind of a asset classes. So this is in a way a very sensitive aspect of trying to create a judgment around how the government and central banks are going to behave, how the growth will kickstart, and connect that back with how the economic environment will play out. And now we'll move to the next step, that if we are thinking that there could be higher inflation, yes, certainly there is a possibility. And growth, yes, everybody expects that it will take some time to kickstart the growth. It will take some while. So higher inflation definitely is there, which will be important to manage. So in this type of situation, how to look at my portfolio? How should I look at my asset allocation in my portfolio? So broadly, we have tried to highlight here 4 key areas from the perspective of allocating your assets and the reason or rationale or requisitioning for that. Now, one key aspect is that, yes, okay, on an ongoing basis, what do I do with my money when I, let's say, get a monthly salary, or if I'm getting from my business a kind of a profits on a quarterly or annual basis? One of the key aspects is that I want to have asset growth, like right, the leftmost quadrant. I mean, if you see, or rightmost, whichever way you look at it, that is my asset growth. So for that, you invest into growth kind of asset classes. You look at some kind of equities, mid and small cap funds, etc. The other aspect is the income generation. That okay, from the asset growth now, certain aspects I need to have some generation of income, which could be like duration funds or bond funds, government securities, etc. The third angle is, in this type of situation, if there is a expectation of inflation coming through, then maybe some kind of a resource funds, energy, mining, gold, this type of assets would be very important to hold in the portfolio. And the fourth is volatility hedge, that in some situation, if you feel that markets are very expensive right now, or there could be some turbulence in the market. Then for that type of a protection towards a volatility hedge, one can have some funds parked in a liquid funds or like arbitrage fund, maybe dynamically asset allocation type of a fund, which moves into equity, fixed income, commodities, like that type of a situation without individually trying to take a judgment. So friends, I'm sure like when typically, your advisor comes and has a discussion with you, some of this type of discussion happens. So now if the aspect is that in the current situation, inflation is definitely going to be coming through, then maybe a little bit heavier weightage towards this quadrant of the inflation hedge, some kind of allocation towards thematic funds, resource funds, which will be giving exposure to gold, energy, mining. It could be either both local entities, local companies, or local stocks, or funds giving exposure to local Indian energy companies or commodity companies, or in some instance it could be even offshore in international companies, because let's say gold mining, etc., are not really found in Indian listed space. So one can look at international aspect as well. And at the same time, the asset growth also needs to be maintained. So as and when the bounce back is happening, you can't really be left outside of the growth part of your portfolio. So if you look at the good mix amongst these four, that's the key aspect in terms of how one should look at your portfolio. And based on the current situation, one can try to identify few good areas where inflation hedge can be achieved and few good areas where your asset growth can happen. At the same time, some volatility hedge, some kind of a so-called, what we call as a contingency fund, also some amount is always useful, maybe in the form of arbitrage funds or short-term bond funds, which can be a steady sort of accrual, high credit quality funds where your amounts can be allocated. Now, I think, this is again like kind of a discussion and theoretical discussion. And I'll come to my last slide. I mean, we started with my first slide where I spoke about Nassim Taleb and the very beautiful picture of a black swan. And I'll close also with a section from him. Nassim Taleb mentions in some discussion that, like, what is this, like, at beyond a point, don't show me your market views, okay, boss, this is what is going to happen, or don't tell me what is happening or what is going to happen in the market, because at some point nobody knows actually. If one could foresee the future, everybody would be in different situation right now. So don't show me future, show me your portfolio. So I just thought that in my closing slide, I'd like to highlight what I am doing with my funds, or let's say my monthly salary which comes, how I'm allocating that. See, I'm being very open. I mean, in some form or fashion, I put this up even on public domain on my LinkedIn a couple of months back. A lot of people have different terminology, meaning different to them. For some people, wealth management and asset allocation means different. For some people, it means different. For me, it's very different. I belong to a like humble background, middle class type of approach. I get my salary with my hard effort, and I try to allocate it in a very prudent and careful manner so as to conserve as well as have a potential for growth. So I just give this as a one sort of a thing from my side, like approximately 50% is going into the equities. And within that, the key reason for that is to get an India exposure, which will give me like, through broader market, like a large cap index funds. It gives me beta of the market, overall the growth. The other aspect is small cap actively managed funds, which gives a good kicker or like a potential for growth. And the third small element within equities goes into some thematic commodity and energy funds. This is on the Indian context, Indian markets only, I'll just like to highlight. But mainly it's for the perspective of like, helping as a kind of an inflation hedge in my portfolio. Within the debt side, I have approximately 30% going over there, which is mainly in the form of short-term bond funds. Some small component I had parked into arbitrage funds, little bit lesser risk as compared to bond fund, but at the same time, not purely into liquid kind of allocation, little bit, kept it over there. And main reason for having about 30% over there is that one can argue as a relative valuation of equity and debt. Might be sometimes equity is considered a little bit more expensive right now. Maybe in this last 3 to 6 months, the earnings have dipped off across the board, all companies, and markets have rallied pretty well. So as a earnings multiple or as a price to book multiple, markets do look a little bit steeply valued. So as a relative attractiveness, have kept about 30% into gold. About 10% is into global. So it helps in a good diversification, and also certain countries, like for example, the US. I have my one fund which is going into US equities, where at some point of time one could think that US markets do have a potential for higher growth, top of the class innovation in technology, etc. Very often starts from the US. So about 10% goes into the international feeder funds, and about 10% is, I like to leave it as a kind of a liquid. Basically, some of it I retain it in my bank account at any point of time, like any kind of emergency or like expenses are required monthly basis, etc. And some component is parked into my liquid fund. So that is broadly how the portfolio is allocated. Of course, this excludes some other aspects like standard investments into NPS or EPFO and some leverage, home loan, etc. That is a different, but structurally the monthly amount where it goes, I've just tried to articulate and highlight. And with that, I would like to just open up for questions with this concluding part. That, see, structurally, one can argue that we need to be very emotion free. At some discussion, we try to highlight that equities are a little bit definitely not looking very cheap, but yes, it is attractive component of your portfolio. Debt, fixed income is needed, but interest rates also are close to like historical lows. So we could see some potential in terms of rising interest rates. Everybody is expecting that, yes, if governments continue the way in which they are doing, borrowings will increase, rates could increase. So one has to be prepared for that aspect also. So maybe useful to diversify across commodities, or if, as we saw, inflation is increasing, so commodities also will help, or have allocation towards other countries, different asset classes which have low correlation with each other. And in like some way, sometimes avoid any kind of human bias, play safe with the rules. That will be sometimes better to you in the long term. So with that, just I left it with this one slide. There is one very interesting thing called break the bias. There is a thing on social media, TTL Social. These are stand-up comedians, and we have done this series called Break the Bias. If anybody would be ever interested, do look it up, and you might find it useful or just funny. So with that, I would like to open up back to Zoher and take up any questions that would have been there from the audience, or any comments, suggestions, etc.
Anil sir, thank you very much. That was really quite insightful. Many of the questions that were actually coming up, most of them have already been answered with the kind of asset allocation that you have shown already. Nonetheless, there are some questions which are from people who would like to know that apart from this ideal asset allocation portfolio that you have mentioned in one of your slides, the second last slide, I believe, if someone is probably, let's say, is wanting to invest directly into the equity markets. So what is the kind in equity or debt and other markets? What is the kind of direct interference that you would say that they should keep? Consider it equity or debt instruments are already the same, but equity markets. And the follow-up question to is that if equity is not as attractive at the moment, then what is your view that maybe this will pick up, and what are the kind of sectors that you would look at if you were looking at the two parts to this question?
Sure. Very good question. I think two things. First of all, I can't really speak about any specific stocks that, okay, if you want to invest directly into stocks, what type of stocks one should look at. But I'd like to highlight and maybe leave it open also, if the person is, if the friend who has asked is interested. We have recently come out with a very interesting note, which is called Vision 2020. So there we have tried to bucket each sector into three categories. Like when you go for eye testing, the optician usually puts a 20/20 test, like how clarity is there from seeing from here to 20 feet, and some technical aspect, how they measure it, of course. But we have tried to cover that into sectors specifically, that certain sectors will be very fast to have a jump up. So some of those sectors could be, let's say, for example, into personal mobility, like vehicles, auto ancillary, etc. Some of these could be seeing a good uptick again. Some of the other sectors will take some time to recap, like, for example, travel and tourism, hotel industry. Some of those so-called spending where you have a consumer discretion type of a spending, that will take little bit time, little bit longer to get kick-started. So if you try to split your view on some stocks and before that top down on some sectors, maybe you can use this type of a filter that whether that company is in a sector which a person who is currently in a crisis type situation or currently who is slightly conscious of spending money, whether they will be willing to spend, yes or no. If yes, then yes, you are in a good stock or a good sector, you should go with it. Or other aspect, that if some of these action by the central governments and the banks are going to enhance the money which is chasing some of these sectors, like for example, I highlighted about some of the energy or commodity space. Okay, so then those could be something which could see a faster recovery or pickup from the capital market perspective, mind you, not necessarily from the underlying business perspective. That could take some more time. But if from a pure capital markets perspective, some of those sectors will be much more faster to improve. And second question was about, sorry, say it again.
You have answered it, sir. That it was the sectors that was the case.
Sectors, yeah.
So moving on to the next question. In one of the slides that you have mentioned, a person has asked that, okay, since we are moving, since the assessment or the belief is that this is probably going towards a stagflation, will a fiscal stimulus be helpful? And if that is the case, do you believe that there might be a chance of tweaking the portfolio to different asset classes? Second part of the question is that within the play of asset allocation, gold is something that is only talked about when it comes to a crisis or a situation. So what is your view on gold going forward? Since we are, as you have rightly mentioned, the kind of events that has happened. So in that view, what is the case?
Sure, very good question. First point is that we are seeing already a huge fiscal stimulus happening. And that is one of the reasons why we could be in stagflation and non-deflation, which is why I just opened this slide once again. If you see that inflation is going up if you come to stagflation, and if you see the other side, like as I mentioned, sometime during April, people were worried that we had already slipped into deflation. So with the fiscal stimulus that is happening, we are seeing a coordinated effort, not just fiscal stimulus by the central governments, but also monetary stimulus by the central banks. Okay, so both of these put together are working in huge coordination and trying to pull the economy out of the low growth or negative growth. But as an outcome of that, they will definitely land up in pumping up inflation a little bit more, which, as we saw earlier, at least at this point of time, the inflation expectations and the inflation numbers are seeming well within the limits which the central banks have put for themselves. For example, in the US, Federal Reserve has a 2% inflation target, and it is much more below that. So they are okay with that, even if it increases inflation. So temporarily, till the time growth again pulls back and we come to a reflation type of a situation, growth is remaining low, but inflation is going up. So that could result into a stagflation. That is the point I was trying to highlight. And to your response, that will it result into fiscal stimulus? Fiscal stimulus, yes, it's already fiscal stimulus is there in big way. Hence, this is being potentially caused. Now, as it moves to the next phase and the success of the stimulus and the economy reviving will play out, we would lead towards a kind of a reflation where growth is also started increasing. But in the beginning, might be inflation also will increase. And as the next stage, inflation also will come under control. Growth will still remain there, and which will come to the Goldilocks situation, which is like the so-called, I mean, best case scenario, if you may say it like it. And now to the second point, that if we are leading towards either deflation or stagflation, means wherever you look at it, stuff like gold definitely come to a light. No doubt, very often it's spoken about only during the time of crisis, but well, that's the situation which everybody has to deal with. That even if you're not in a crisis situation, look at this asset allocation framework. and always be prepared. Have some component in all 4 quadrants in different proportions. So gold as a small inflation hedge in your portfolio should always be there as your portfolio allocation. Might be you don't want to take a tactical call. You get my point. So let's say in 2019 or November, or like just around Diwali, post Diwali time, not many people were very gung ho about boss gold, but yes, little bit buying had started. So now today you look 1 year back, 1 year return in gold would be about 30-40% might be. I mean, I don't know exact numbers, but just approximately I'm saying. Now that type of a return is not something which will come on a regular year-on-year basis. So structurally, it's like, you know, buying a insurance within your portfolio. That you buy the insurance, let's say every year you renew your car insurance, correct? But you buy it and then you just pray कि सब जरूरत पड़े नहीं कार इंश्योरेंस की खर्चा करने के लिए, ऐसे ही होना चाहिए, पूरा साल निकल जाए अपना. So like that way, some component you should always allocate towards gold and let it be there also quite in a normal way. If there is no turbulence or no geopolitical tension or whatever, it will remain over there. I mean, you know, structurally, though no doubt gold also has certain structural fundamental aspects of demand and supply as well, but still, even beyond the demand and supply, it does act as a kind of what should I say, like, you know, safe haven asset. So yes, you are right. Indefinitely, this type of crisis situation, it does do well, but even otherwise, it's a very important must-have component of your overall portfolio.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you. So there are a couple of questions which are now related to the capital markets. I'm sure that we are not able to predict with certainty what the markets would look like. But a couple of questions from a gentleman by the name of Mukul here. Markets can be irrational for long period of times before adjusting to fundamentals. What is your view? The second part of that question is, what is more preferable, growth investing or value investing? What is your view?
Very good point. See, well, whether market is irrational or rational, that is different people's perspective, how you look at it. But the capital markets getting disconnected with the real economy, that is something which you can debate about or you can argue about. So one can say that in these last, let's say 6 months, the capital markets have been dealing with the real economy, right? Because on ground, real economy is suffering, the companies are under pressure, results are declining, people are having concerns about the job prospects or their businesses, daily livelihoods. But still we are seeing the capital markets in a rallying situation. As I mentioned earlier, we have almost come back to the levels which we saw in February, March 2020. So 20% earnings down, but market is at same level. So suddenly the valuation or the levels at which you are buying seems a little bit expensive. So at these type of situations, one can argue that the disconnect between capital markets and economy is looking very large. But then in some way, that is how typically speaking capital markets work. They either work with a big expectation type of a bias. So whether that expectation will be right and it will play out, that only time will tell. If I look at some of the historical data, like 2008, after the first level of correction, we saw some bit of pullback and people thought, yes, now this is the full pullback. But later on, one realized, no, it was a sort of a so-called dead cat bounce, as we call it, that underlying fundamental economic improvement had not yet happened, but little bit capital markets gave a rally. Now, are we saying that today we are in that type of a situation structurally? In theory, yes, but in practical, as your participant, Mr. Mukul mentioned, markets, yes, can be at some points of time very much delinked or disconnected with the fundamentals of the company. But then people don't mind paying expensive for certain companies if you feel that in a long term, company has a good management, has a good business, strong earnings capability, and the quality of those earnings are having a good potential to grow. So people would not mind to pay even bigger premium for owning those type of stocks. So till the time that continues, this delink or the what was the word I am forgetting you had used, and I try to deflect from that word, irrational. I try to use a different concept, but yes, I think your word was specifically like a market is irrational. So that could at some point of time be continued. And second aspect is that whether in this type of situation, do you feel growth style is better or value style? Well, I feel both have their own benefits, but in the current type of situation, value style would be in a good position. There could be some stocks which you are finding with a very high margin of safety. There could be some stocks which you feel are in a very significant life cycle lows or structural stocks which have been structurally ignored by the markets. So they could be good value picks, but one has to be very careful and cautious when you do that, because it's not so simple to just see some 2-3 context. Yes, this stock looks cheap in terms of price to book value or price to a dividend yield. Sometimes on the lighter side, Hindi में बोलते हैं कि सस्ता और सस्ता हो गया, मतलब you feel it's a value buy and it's because it's cheap, but maybe it's cheap for a reason and it becomes even cheaper. So one has to be very careful while doing a good value buy that there is and make sure there is a good margin of safety, a good earnings quality of the company, and only then look to add that kind of a investment opportunity in your portfolio.
Thank you, Anil. So coming to the last question, since we are running out of time literally,
Sure.
After which I will ask you to if you have any closing remarks. There is a couple of gentlemen now are actually moving on from a little bit of the markets part. I think one of the gentlemen by the name of Vishal, I think he is an NRI, and he's asking what are the kind of allocation or equity allocations if one as an NRI would like to do in India, they should do, and if FDs is also FDs should also be considered as a good bet considering they are tax free.
Well, I think yes, you are right that as an NRI you do have certain restrictions in terms of what you can buy or what you cannot buy, and yes, definitely FDs. If you feel that yes, you have a low risk appetite and you just want to park your funds in Indian rupees, then FD is considered useful. But at the same time, beyond a FD, like as I mentioned, like a short-term bond fund, if you don't have a very big affinity to a particular bank or a FD, a short-term bond fund or a fund which is a kind of a roll-down strategy can be useful because it has a flexibility for exit. See, in FD, what happens? I mean, that let's say the investor invests into a FD for hypothetically 5-year period, and for whatever reason, after the end of 1 year, there is a requirement out of that amount, 25% you need for some purpose, or you find some good, other investment opportunity, like just hypothetically buying some real estate or whatsoever might be the situation, or allocating some amount into equities. Then if you break the FD and all, it becomes very challenging. So if you are into a bond fund instead, like hence I mentioned short-term bond fund, or when I say roll-down strategy, it is basically a fund which has a fixed kind of a term to maturity in terms of the portfolio securities that it holds. So there is a broad level of clarity in terms of how the portfolio is going to roll down. So let's say today the portfolio owns bonds which are having 3 years maturity, and that just keeps rolling down. So after 6 months, if you look at that portfolio, it will now be with a maturity of 2.5 years, then 2 years, 1.5 years, and gradually it will become 0. But the benefit of this is that anytime during this journey, being an open-ended mutual fund, investor can at any point of time exit or redeem some partial amount as and when they require and earn that much component and just exit. So from only that angle, I'm just trying to highlight that yes, this could be a good alternative to be considered. But yes, otherwise, if the requirement is to have a very straightforward and no risk involved kind of approach, then NRI FDs, I mean, in terms of the rates and in terms of the terms that they offer and all, can also be considered by the investor who is NRI.
Thank you, Anil. Final question to you coming from Mr. Ashish Rumta. I think he's also probably from the same kind of field that you are. His question to you is, how do you see widening of credit spreads and increased volatility in equity market in your portfolio, and how you adjust for those risk-weighted returns? Is that something you can share or divulge light on?
Well, I mean, see, I can just give a broad structure. When we look at the credit spreads, there are multiple ways to absorb and analyze that and incorporate that in your portfolio. One of the key sign of credit spreads increasing is that the comfort on the particular sector or the particular entity who is the who's doing the leverage, or the company who is taking the borrowing, the comfort on that has been changed, right? So because of that, the credit spreads are widening. Now, the reason for that could be anything. It could be a discomfort on the management or the style of the management. It could be a change of the business dynamics or the outlook for the business, or it could simply be a kind of change of the risk appetite of the market overall. That, okay, I don't want to lend to a particular segment of the market. Let's say, for example, a particular sector, I want to stay away from that. So if in this type of situation, you combine it with a market where on the equity side also there is a enhanced volatility, okay, not directly related to that particular company or that particular sector, but in general, if like the volatility in the equity markets also is very high, then one should try to quickly move your portfolio to very high credit quality kind of a asset allocation, maybe move to within fixed income, move to purely government bonds. So there were many such opportunities in the past also, if one could have identified and taken a good position in government securities. Like right now, if you see, government bonds are almost at like historically, I mean, cyclical lows. So it's not always easy to take a position in the government bonds, because we could see some hardening of interest rates, which could result in some bit of a volatility even in your GSECs in terms of mark to market. But otherwise, that could be a very good change in asset allocation, where you feel that equity is also under a bit of a turbulence and higher volatility, and credit spreads are widening, so you can't go to corporate side or invest into corporate bonds. So it could be very good to then just on the accruals, you know, don't take the extra risk, just come into sovereigns.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much. Is there any final comments that you would like to make to our audience?
Well, I think just to summarize, my view remains that we are all in a very unprecedented situation. We need to be very conscious of how this situation is being tackled by governments as well as central banks world over. Structurally, the expectation would be that governments and central banks will continue the battle, and that would result in a kind of a situation where we see increasing money supply, where we'll see increasing fiscal stimulus. People are going to be expecting this type of a situation from governments, that what next will be there. Like, for example, even in the US yesterday, even after the Federal Reserve announced that they will keep interest rate zero for the whole of next year, the expectation was that, oh, they didn't announce about any particular more further stimulus or whatsoever. So it's like there is a kind of a unwritten expectation that banks, central banks and governments will continue this kind of a coordinated effort to pull back the economy. In these situations, one should be very cautious in terms of being able to move between the assets. One should be clear that if inflation will be the first layer of reaction before the growth also picks up. So during that situation, try to give a good allocation towards real assets, commodities, energy, etc. This type of a portfolio allocation will be very helpful. And in general, structurally, one should not really become very paranoid, or one should not become anxious and exit capital markets completely, because structurally these are cycles, and in hindsight maybe these points of entry or these times would be very useful. And wherever, then don't try to get overly stressed. Don't take any human bias. Don't let any human bias get involved. Continue, for example, with your SIP. I articulated my own example. Even during the month of March or end of March, early April, I did not make any large ticket enhanced lump sum investment into either fixed income or gold or equities. I had certain these set of SIPs and I continued. I used to even speak about it in public domain on social media. I am not doing market timing. I am sticking to my rule-based SIP allocation. So in long term, on a hindsight, yes, at least those 2-3 of my monthly allocations came at a lower price. I'm happy with that. I don't want to have a very heavily churning kind of a portfolio allocation. Likewise, in general, if you look at a good disciplined portfolio allocation, well advised by your financial advisor, I think you will be in good shape from a long-term perspective. With that, I would like to end this discussion from my side. Thank you very much, Zohair and everybody at Edelweiss Wealth Management. And thank you all, the participants. Stay safe. All the best.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much for this fruitful interaction. I'm sure our audience must have found your expertise of significant value and they will gain from this experience. We're already having many people actually write to us or thanking you for your views. There were many people who actually participated on your polls. I see about 19 people who participated on your polls, saying a yes to many of those questions that you said. A couple of them no's. But thank you so much, Anil. We really appreciate your time on this. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to having you all join us back again on our next webinar. Till then, stay home, stay safe, stay calm. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.